Hi there, this is Brian Ray. We're going to be talking today about the Karma Curvature node. This is a new feature in Houdini 19.5. Starting here in the stage, Solaris environment. So let's start with a material library. And I'm going to make a Karma subnet, Karma MaterialX subnet. And this not only makes it easy to copy and paste materials, keep things organized, but it also has an additional benefit. I'm going to real quick just delete all of these nodes that I'm not going to be using. Has an additional benefit of filtering this tab menu. So you can see I don't have my entire list of VOPs here. I have only the ones that are appropriate to building a Karma MaterialX shader. So I'm going to start with an unlit surface. And I like to use this as a debug shader. So I can at any time pop this into my output and see the results of whatever it is that I'm putting into it. I'm going to call my shader chipped paint and go back out here and set my display flag. And then I'm going to, first of all, autofill material so I get my paths. And if I assign this to Crag, you'll see that nothing happens. And that's because Crag comes with his own material. And if I look at one of his transforms here, you'll see I've got this material binding with a principled shader on it. And then you can see the resolved full material is that principled shader. Now up here, I have the resolved full material being the chipped paint. You can see in the material binding a chipped paint. But the way USD is going to tend to work is that a specific will override a general. So if I've assigned a material to my top level object and I want to be able to override some individual piece, in order to be able to do that, I need the individual pieces to be stronger in opinion. But there are ways to override the overrides. So if I'm going to turn off the assign to geometry here just so we can keep things clean. If I add an assigned material down here, and I pull my chipped paint in there and my crag, we still don't see anything happening. Unable to find primitive /crag. What do you mean? It's right there. Oh, I did that opposite. Crag goes here, paint goes there. We still don't see anything happening, but if I spin down material binding and change the strength, I can say stronger than descendants. Make sure I'm in CPU mode. So now, because it's stronger than descendants, it's going to override the lower level stuff. So I come over here and I look at abdomen mid, and I see the material binding is still the principled shader, but the resolved material is the chipped paint because it is stronger than descendants. Okay, so let's go back into the material library and we're going to start actually setting up a real shader. So first of all, we're talking about the Karma Curvature node. Again, this is new in Houdini 19.5. At present, it only works in CPU mode. It doesn't work for XPU yet. That is coming. So if I take my K output and I plug that into emission color here, we get something that we don't expect. I mean, this is worthless. This isn't doing anything. And no matter what I twiddle with my sliders here, it's never going to be anything interesting. And that's because it needs to know a little bit about this geometry. It needs to know the position and it needs to know the normals. So I'm going to come over here and make a MaterialX position node, MaterialX normals node. So now we can see, okay, curvature is doing something. It's going to be black where we've got concave surfaces and white where we have convex surfaces. So at the tops of the horns where this is rounded, we're going to get white. In the eyeballs and all of these crevices, we're going to get black. And then anywhere that is flat, we'll get a mid-gray, and then it'll fall off in either direction. But it looks pretty nasty. I mean, it's all triangulated. This is because the Crag model is not a subdiv surface. And the curvature node, it can only shade whole polygons. So what we need to do is we need to subdivide this. Now, you could, make a subdivide SOP and make it finer and finer. and your geometry would become very heavy and hard to use. But we're going to take advantage of Karma's ability to dice the geometry at render time by making a real subdiv surface. So I'm going to spin down any one of these and just grab the mesh. And over here in the scene graph details, this tells me everything that USD has on this this mesh. If I scroll down here and I find subdivision scheme, I can see it's set to none. So I'm going to right click that and choose edit property, and that'll make a new edit properties lop that is already preloaded with the property that I'm going to want to change, which is subdivision scheme. Of course, it's aimed just at the primitive that I was looking at, the abdomen mid. So I'm going to change this path to say everything under crag and all of the geometry under those transforms. So I'm going to get all of the meshes. Now if I change subdivision scheme to Catmull Clark, everything turns smooth. And you can see down here in the scene graph details that's updated. Okay, and I'm going to change the name of this thing, say edit crag subdiv, just so I know what it's doing when I look at it later. Whoops, that is not what I wanted. I wanted the material library. All right, so now we're ready to actually start shading the guy. Now obviously, we don't want to be looking at the curvature. We want a surface of some kind. So I'm going to make a standard surface called paint. And let's make this guy like one of those die-cast toys. We'll make him a nice, bright fire engine red, because that'll be nice and obvious when things are happening. This kind of paint is probably, we want this to be an old toy. So he's not real shiny. We're going to take this spec roughness up, plug that into my surface output, and see maybe a little less roughness. He's still a little shiny. So now we've got red paint guy. So now let's make another surface, and this will be that die-cast metal that's underneath. It's a little rough. Let's take a look at it. And we'll make a dome light out here, just so that we get a better idea of what this looks like in a real environment. Let's get a texture, see. Skylight garage. We'll play with our toy indoors. All right, so then this is metal, so we need to take metalness all the way up. And now, if he were unpainted, does that look like steel, that die-cast stuff? I think the color needs to come down a bit. And maybe a little bit more roughness. Yeah, that looks like one of those toys. All right, so here we've got our dude. So what we want to do is we want to mix between these two surfaces. Let's call this metal. Actually, let's call this die-cast, just so we're more specific. And we'll call this red paint. So we want to mix between these two surfaces. And fortunately, there is a very convenient MaterialX mix node. And this is another one that doesn't currently work in XPU. We know it's very important. It will happen. But right now it doesn't work. And the mix node, if you don't have anything in the mix, it's going to... 0 is the background, and 1 is the foreground. So we're going to plug our curvature into that mix control and see what happens. So now we've got our red paint on the most convex areas and the metal in the concave areas. And this actually looks kind of cool, but it's not quite what we want. So in order to reverse that, I'm just going to add an invert. So now we have flipped that around, so we've got metal being rubbed away and the concave areas are are painted. But this is maybe a little bit too much. We want it to be just like a little bit of chipping on those edges, not quite so ridiculous. So taking a look at the Karma curvature, its space is 0 to 1. 0 is concave areas, the cavities. 1 is the most convex areas, and then the flat areas are going to be 0.5. That's great and all, but I don't want to deal with the concave areas at all right now. If I change this space to -1 to 1, now we're going to have the convex areas are still 1, but the concave areas are -1, and the flat areas are 0. So having done that, what I can do is I can just throw away all of my concave information by using a max node. And this is going to take two inputs, the curvature node, and then the second input is, I'm just going to leave it as a number. So it's always going to be the highest of either my curvature node or 0. So if, in effect, I'm just throwing away everything below 0. You could do the same thing with a clamp. Just max was the first thing I thought of. So I do that, and now all of my concave areas are zeros. But I don't want anything on the 0.5. I wanted to take just the highest values. So how would I go about that? I think I want to say if remap. There we go. So let's plug this into the shader, the debug shader, and take a look at it. And so I want to get rid of these areas that would be flat gray. So let's say if what's coming in is 0.9, just the top 10%, then it's going to be 0, and then the output is, and I would imagine that I'm probably getting super brights here. Let's plug this back in and see how this changes things when I plug it in. Yeah, see, I'm getting like super metal. So I probably want to clamp at this point, just to make sure I'm not getting anything outside of the 0 to 1 range. There we go. So now it looks naturalistic again. So what I can do at this point is if I change the convex scale, I can pull this in so that I'm getting less and less, theoretically. Yeah, it has to be pretty small numbers, looks like. So I'm getting just the edges where the paint's been rubbed off. All right, so that's looking okay. It's pretty regular though. I can change the bias, I think, to adjust the fall off so that I'm getting something more contrasty. That pushes it out again, so let's change bias up to like there, and then change this down to like 0.001. Even smaller? That's too small. Oops. Split the difference there. Okay, there we go. All right, so these are really small numbers, and this is getting kind of twitchy. I think we're okay the way we've got it right now. What I want to do is I want to make this a little less regular. This looks kind of eroded, as if it's been weathered by wind and sand or something. But I instead wanted to mix some noise in this. So I'm going to take some cell noise. I'm choosing cell noise because it's got a kind of a squarish aspect to it that makes it look chipped. And noise also requires a position as an input. So let's take a look at this in the debug shader just to find out what cell noise looks like and what we need to do to it. So immediately we can see it's probably too big. This isn't going to get us a noisy appearance at all. But we can modify the position values going in. If I make a multiply, there we go. And I like to just use a constant for this, so I get a nice slider instead of having to deal with that vector input. And we're multiplying, so multiplying by 0 makes everything 0, so I'm just going to set it back to 1 so we get back to where we were. And so if I raise this, I am multiplying the position values, the position vectors. In essence, I'm making the entire world bigger so that the noise appears smaller on the object. So if I take this up to 60, then we'll start to see we've got this pattern, and that's going to look a little bit chippy-like. But I don't want to see these mid-gray patterns. I think I want to make this more contrasty. So I'm going to add another remap here. Not a remap. Let's make it a color correct. And I'm going to... Whoa. Color correct did not do what I expected it to do, because it plugged into the hue instead of to the input. There we go. Let's just take contrast up to like 10, just so we got solid black and white. And then of course we do need to clamp again, because now we've got values that are above 0 or above 1 and below 0. So I'll clamp that. And so then this, I still got a little bit of grays in here. I think that'll be okay. That'll just be... So let's plug this into my... Actually, first let's plug this back into the surface. And take this thing and plug it into my curvature's convex scale. And now we can see we've got... Okay, well that looks as chipped paint-like, but now it's splattered everywhere. Because this is now overriding that very small number that I put in the scale to begin with. I come back here, I can see it grayed out 0.0004. So if I multiply this thing by another constant, I'm going to put that value in here, 0.00, was it three zeros or 2 zeros? 3 zeros. Very small number. Plug that in here, then I should get back to where we were, but just with the noisy breakup. And so now this is looking like, you know, it's been smacked against things and paint's chipped off instead of it being worn away. But whenever you're using procedural noise like this, you tend to get something that looks very regular and uniform. And so you kind of need to mix several noises together in order to make things look more organic. I'm going to make some space for myself here. I think all of this stuff. So what was I doing? I was going to mix some more noise into this. So let's get a uniform noise. MaterialX Noise 3D. And I'm going to grab this little structure here again. And I think I'm going to need a much, this is, okay. So the noise, I believe, has a, goes into negatives. It shouldn't matter for this purpose, but sometimes you might want to clamp. I think I will clamp it. Actually, I'm going to leave the clamp out and see if it makes a difference when I plug it in later. But I'm going to take this value down to like 3 because I want to get this nice I'm going to need to increase its contrast. And once again, it goes into the hue for some reason. That's really weird. Clamp. And increase contrast like 10. Ooh. Gain it down? No, gain it up. There we go. So now I've got this kind of Holstein cow look, and it's going to make sure that the breakup only happens in the areas that are white instead of all over. So I can come over here and I can multiply this noise. Let's switch my debug shader. Multiply that by this. And when I plug this into convex scale, we'll see now that we're limiting where that chip went off to kind of more random areas, so it's not everywhere. So I think this is looking pretty nice in terms of what I wanted to do. I could mix some more noises into this. I think I'd probably want to take some of the straight lines off of the chips and mix a little bit of that high frequency standard noise into those. I'm not going to bother with that right now because I kind of want to get to another part of this, which is using the other half of the curvature to put some dirt in the grooves. Because this toy, as we said, is old, it's been played with, it's picked up some grime. So then, first let's get the grime color. I take my red paint here, and I'm going to copy its base color. And then I'm going to make it constant. Set it to color. And just paste that value here. And then bring that in, and I'm changing the base color of the red paint for the same thing that I had. But now I can do a color correct on this. There we go. Now it's fed into the in instead of the hue. And I can take the saturation down a little bit, and I can take the gain down like quite a bit. Just make this kind of dirty looking, and maybe a gamma. Now gamma doesn't really, it's just a solid color. Can I change the hue at all? I've got a hue control here. Let's see what happens if I feed a constant into it. Yeah, I can swing that just a little warmer. Yeah, so there's our dirt color. So I'm going to make another mix node. And this is going to be the foreground color because it's on top of the original color. And I'll put that in there, and we should see this change back to our fire engine red. Excellent. All right. So now we need another Karma Curvature node. Once again, we need our position and normal. Oh, it doesn't detect the name, it detects the order. Okay, make sure I hit the P then. Well, it's not quite as smart as I thought it was, but that's probably better in many cases. All right, so I have my curvature. And I want to, again, make this from -1 to 1, but this time I want the concave areas. So I'm going to remap and say, input here, my input low is -1, and my input high is 1, as before. But now I want to reverse the colors that they result in. 1 to 0. No. 1 to -1. Okay, so this is... Actually, I wonder if I can just invert. It's hard to test it. I think these two things should be the same. Where'd my debug shader go? It's hard to know because I can't see the negative colors. But that and this should be equivalent. They are not quite the same. I think I trust my remap more because I understand mathematically what it's doing. So my negative ones that are coming in are being transformed into ones. And my ones are being transformed into negative ones. And so now I can take the same max and invert and remap and clamp. Plug that into here. And now I should see bright colors in cavities and blacks everywhere else. And it only took the remap. Okay, so I do not want to invert this one. What is this remap doing? Oh, that's doing the limiting. There we go. So there is the results of this curvature. And that is going to be plugged into my mix. If I turn my debug shader back off, I see black. Why is that? Why see I black? There we go. I changed the wrong thing. What did I change? I changed my emission to 0 instead of the switch. Let's make sure that this still works. Yep, okay. Choose the correct node, Brian. All right, so now if I plug this into the mix, I should see that's better. So the eye cavities get dark. Some other things get dark that maybe I don't want, but I can address that. With the concave scale. And, you know, dirt, you know, it won't have this these nice clean edges. We'll mix some noise into it first of all, but I also want to do a blur. So let's make this a Gaussian blur. Just turn the size up. See what happens here. is not doing what I expect it to do. Feed the blur into debug shader. Blur is not appearing to do anything. That is most unexpected. Maybe what I need to blur is the position. That'll be weird. No, that's not it. Why isn't that working the way I wonder if blur simply doesn't work. Oh, you know what? That is the case. We can't do a blur. We can't do any convolution in the MaterialX shader. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to maybe change the bias. Give that a try. Yeah. So bias is going to control a fall off, which is going to be the only way we're going to get blurriness. Okay, so I want to mix some noise into this. And I don't want the chipped looking noise. I want just a regular noise. Grab my position and a multiply and a constant. Plug this into the debug shader. I think it makes sense to put the debug switch here. Or not. Oops, because I haven't set this to 1 yet. There we go. That's what I was expecting. All right, so let's just get this go. And once again, I need to remove my value out to here. Concave scale. Multiply by this. And let's look at the results. There we go. Just kind of look at this this area over here. And let's just add some breakup to it and makes it a little less uniform. Yeah, I'm liking that. And then another noise with a lower scale. This one's down to, let's make this like 9. And multiply the final result by that. So now we got some irregularly spaced grunge. And we've got our chipped paint. And this looks like an old toy. We could go a little further and do more and more on it, of course. You can always go further. But hopefully this will give you an idea of how to build a shader of this kind. And we come back out here and we see, oh wow, that is a lot of nodes. And it looks intimidating, and you wonder, would I ever be able to understand and do that kind of thing? But hopefully you saw, as we were building it up, just step by step, solving problems as they came up, and just stopping to think about the math a little bit, that it's not really as troublesome as it looks. And at the very end, we're going to want to bypass this thing with the debug shader, and probably even delete it so that it's not part of our network that's getting saved out in USD. And so there we go. We have our chipped paint toy shader. See you next time.